Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I must say that I found the contribution by the Minister for Trade and Industry quite entertaining. And I was also a little amused by her presentation. She spent some time on the ease of doing business, and I just want to remind her, you know, that she came here last year, if I'm not mistaken, and indicated to us that she would bring it down in the next round. But what has happened is that it has moved from 66 in 2014 to 79. I'll show you how I understand just now. Then the 2018-79, sorry, 2016-79, 2018-102, and 2019-105. Now, she did mention that the methodology had changed, Madam Speaker. And the methodology had changed because they started to include new things for assessments, such as ownership rights and involvement of women in business. But despite those changes in methodology, the other things remain the same, and I will show you what they are and where they moved in a few minutes. And you can find all of this on doingbusiness.org. But the main point I'm making is that she promised to bring it down last year, and it has gone up. The minister, sorry. The minister also told us that she would bring the corruption index down to, you know, last year. But I think it has gone up by 6 points to 78. I do want to give a quote which addresses one of the issues that the minister mentioned in refuting part of the presentation of my colleague from Chaguanas, from Chaguanas West. All right, and it comes as from a quotation from Rocio Medina Bolivar, IDB Group Country Representative for Trinidad and Tobago, on that study that was undertaken and that loan that was taken in 2013 that my colleague mentioned. And this is the quotation from Mr. Bolivar. He says, in December 2013, the IDB's Board of Directors approved a $120 million loan to fund a flood alleviation and drainage program for the city of Port of Spain, as requested by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The loan was subsequently cancelled in 2017 after it was determined that further design work was needed in order to implement the project. And I emphasize the last sentence here: no money was ever paid out under the loan. So the minister also indicated that, you know, under their tenure, everything improved. I mean, if you hear that story, and you weren't living in Trinidad and you came and you listened, I mean, you would be really impressed. So everything improved. But let me give you an idea using just the ease of business issue. The ease of business rank went from 66 to 105, as I said, from 2014 to 2019. The starting a business rank from 67 to 76, same period. I'm using 2014 and 2019. Dealing with construction permits, 77 to 125. Getting electricity from 10 to 41. Registering property, well, that improved, 178 to 58. Getting credit rank, 28 to 60. Protecting minority investors from 22 to 57. Paying taxes, she mentioned that specifically, 97 to 166. Trading across borders from 73 to 130. Enforcing contracts remain the same, 174 to 174. So, Madam Speaker, I mean, when you take the claims made by the minister and you deal with the reality of the numbers between 2014 and 2019, there is really, I mean, no validity to the claims of the minister. And the minister talked about how the prices of food were high in our time and how the inflation is so low. I just want to mention a couple of things. I mean, I mean this in the best way, you know. I mean, some of the food that she's talking about, some of these people have lost their jobs. You know, they don't even have wages to purchase the food, whether it is high or low. I want to make that point, first of all. Then there is the additional issue of the fact that one of the reasons for the low inflation rate is because after the removal of VAT from all of these items, you would say the inflation was absorbed with the increase of VAT, 12.5% on all of these things. From that point on, you had contraction of the economy as people lost their jobs, businesses closed, confidence waned, etc. And that is why, because of the deflationary effect, you have a low. Anthony Wilson did something in the Express, might have been a week and a half ago, in which he compared a basket of goods to the equivalent basket 1 year later. And he showed that it had gone up by nearly $70, Madam Speaker. So, I mean, to quote the numbers is one thing, to deal with the realities, the feelings of people, and what they are facing in the marketplace is another issue. And the issue of business and consumer confidence and the increasing borrowings. I just want to make a couple of points, and this is from the Economic Bulletin. The first point I want to make, you see, because this is part of the problem that we have as an opposition in dealing with this government, that they say things that have no validity, no basis in fact, and we then have to manage it. You see, he said, consolidated private sector credit grew at a steady pace over the first 7 months of 2019. And then it says, business lending dipped into negative territory by mid-2019. Lending to consumers registered strong growth throughout 2018 and 2019, reaching so-and-so. It said debt consolidation and the loans were for debt consolidation and refinancing purposes, page 24 of the economic report that I mentioned. And it also says that lending to business declined sharply in the first 7 months of 2019, followed by subdued growth throughout 2018. Madam Speaker, I let the document speak. And I prefer to believe what I read in this document by the central bank than to believe what the minister claimed here. And the minister didn't speak about these things, and I'm going to go on now after I mention these items. But, you know, the Minister of Trade has to take into account the following 7 things to achieve what I know she wants to achieve, which is export growth, export in the manufacturing and services sector, and basically buoyancy in the non-energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago. I know she wants to achieve that, but she has to take into account the following things: the ease of doing business issues, which she said that she is dealing with, the Minister of Trade. The minister has to take charge of the Export Development Company of Trinidad and Tobago. She has to deal with the undercapacity issue of the TTMA. She has to deal with the fact that the Exim Bank, according to the Minister of Finance's own admission here, utilize only $10 million out of the $100 million committed to export growth of the manufacturing sector. She has to pay attention to what InvestTT is doing. Must pay attention also, the minister, to the services loan under the IDB, which is basically languishing. And she must take into account as well the IDB SME network, which was established in 2014 when we had the America's Competitiveness Conference here in Trinidad and Tobago. They set up a network with all the Latin American and Caribbean countries to allow SMEs to address and engage each other. The minister talked about the tremendous investment that she's getting here, and I am happy for the country if she's doing that. I am waiting to see how the people will feel the effects of that in terms of jobs and opportunities, because I am not seeing it. And on the issue of growth polls, I just want to say, you see, when you don't appreciate or understand, or you understand it and you do not want to acknowledge what you understand, I don't know which it is in her case, you won't. The whole concept of growth polls is this, which is that you have a country and you have a macroeconomic strategy for it, which is what most governments focus on, and all the multilateral institutions and all the international agencies focus on. But within that country, Trinidad and Tobago, let's use that as the direct example, you have 14 local government corporations and you have 600 communities. Those have been identified by the research work that has been done for this country. And therefore, if you want to have a sub-macro strategy, what you might call a regionally deployed strategy, then you've got to develop strategies that will allow the mini economies of your country to really buttress themselves and develop and evolve. And then when you have a combination of growth at macro level and with growth at several sub-regional levels, you are able to get development, not just from on top, but development from below. And that was related to a whole set of other things. There was a development atlas done for all of Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. And that development atlas did the demographic profile for all 14 regions of Trinidad and Tobago. So you could tell in each region what was missing in education, what was missing in social infrastructure, etc., in health, in everything. And if you have a decentralization strategy and a devolution plan for local government to give more autonomy to local government, then with decentralization, devolution, a regional atlas focused on 14 regions with 600 communities divided among those regions, you could then have these economic growth poles. And located in that are also the economic zones, which is an aspect, all right, the economic aspect of your growth pole. But the growth pole is not limited to economic zones. Economic zones are a subset of a growth pole. I won't go further than that now. I will leave it at that point. But when you don't understand or you don't want to understand, that is no reason to indicate that the other person is either ignorant or don't know what they're doing. If you don't understand, that's your business. Madam Speaker, it is an honor to say a few words on this fifth budget speech of the Minister of Finance and to address some of the issues in the bill which accompanies it, an act to provide for the service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2020. Now, let me say how thrilled I was, Madam Speaker, to listen to and to witness and to listen to the presentation of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, leader of the United National Congress. She offered a clear plan and a clear direction for Trinidad and Tobago. And more than that, she went further. She invited participation and feedback from citizens, Madam Speaker. This is even more important in a context in which no one understands the priorities of this government at this time. No one knows what the priorities are. They don't know. And the majority of citizens are worried about their personal lives, the state of the country, and very, very uncertain and scared about their future and the future of Trinidad and Tobago. So I offer my sincere congratulations to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition for providing direction, clarity, and a plan of action. And I also congratulate her, the Leader of the Opposition, for her openness to the views and the contributions of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to commend as well, Madam Speaker, all my colleagues who have spoken so far for their very thoughtful and well-considered contributions. The member for Couva North, the member for Faizabad, the member for Kamuto Manzalina, member for Caroni East, Oropouche West, Barataria Sawa, Tabakit, Mayaro, member for Chaguanas West this morning. All of them made sterling contributions. And at this point, Madam Speaker, I want to establish 5 very clear facts about the UNC partnership government, which governed from 2010 to 2015, and which lost the election, they forget, by a few votes, 20,000, in 2015. Now, whatever the criticisms and the move along, Madam Speaker, the misrepresentations and the outright prevarications coming from the other side, the tenure of the Kamala Prasad Bisesa government of 2010-2015 left the following things as a legacy. First of all, the UNC coalition brought in upwards of $2 billion in investment annually on average for every year of the 5 years that they were in office. The World Investment Report of 2016 confirms the total figure for foreign investment as $10.38 billion over the period. And the report and later reports do not acknowledge, perhaps it did not get the investments that the minister was speaking about. Perhaps it did not get into the books yet because that happens. Sometimes there is a delay. But what they do record is a minus $180 billion investment. The second thing that the UNC left when they left in 2015 is that they left the highest GDP ever in our country in 2015, close to $177 billion. The GDP for 2018 is in fact 91% of what it was in 2015. We would have to grow, Madam Speaker, by 9% to get back to where we were in 2015. The highest number of jobs were created during the UNC period in office. And the lowest unemployment rate in the history, 3.3% in a particular quarter in 2014. We created 55,000 jobs, and we left 11.5 billion US dollars in the reserves. Now, if you do what the Minister of Finance has done in this budget, which is to add the HSF and the foreign reserves to get the $13 billion that he presents to us, what we would have left in real US dollar money in the accounts in the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago is 17 billion plus US dollars.
That is huge. US.
Fourthly, the decisions that we made in 2011 and 2014, which ushered in a period of new deep water drilling after a hiatus of almost a decade, Madam Speaker, led to the success of Juniper, Truck, Angeline, etc., which is the only thing, Madam Speaker, and this is a fact. This is the only thing that has saved this country from revenue collapse from the third quarter of 2017 to the present time. And fifthly, public sector debt when we left office was a manageable 76.5 billion in 2015. In 2019, it is 102 billion. It is in the same central bank report, depending on how the transparent and comprehensive one is. It can be much more, and it can get to over $150 billion, Madam Speaker. I want to make those 5 things clear. And all this old talk about fumes and so on, and even when you talk about the central bank overdraft, their overdraft here has increased, one, because they came with legislation to increase the amount that is allowed, and secondly, it stands based on the 2017 report. I don't know if we have to wait on a 2018 report in order to know what it is now from the Auditor General, because I asked the Minister on several occasions, and he will not tell me what the central bank overdraft is. So, summary position, Madam Speaker. We left with 11 months of foreign exchange food import cover for Trinidad and Tobago. We left with the lowest employment ever. We left with the most jobs, 56,000. A sizable GDP, revenue flows and natural gas flows, which began in the third quarter of 2017, and which continues now and continues into the future. We concede that the international energy prices fell in 2014, and there would have been a cash flow challenge for the government. But the government really has nothing to complain about in the way that they complain. What they had to do, having convinced the country that they were able to run the country, was to run the country and to manage it. In 2019 now, the whole framework for the government is this, led by the Minister of Finance in his narrative. They want to blame the past and make promises for the future, when the present that they are presiding over and have presided for the last 4 years is so horrible. And citizens at every level in the country feel so battered and bruised and so hopeless, Madam Speaker. And this government refuses to take responsibility for their failure over the last 4 years, which is why we are in here today. So I want to deal with some of the fiscal measures, some of the self-reporting that the government has done in their documents. I want to deal a little bit with small and medium enterprises. The minister talks about, I want to make some points about that. I want to deal with our debt situation if I have the time. And I certainly want to make the case to the population of Trinidad and Tobago for a very clear choice, which is that if you want the country to continue as it is going, Madam Speaker, if the citizens want that, and taking this precarious road where we are headed for a precipice, as I will show you in a few minutes, they can remain with this government, and all of us will fall with them. But if they want to take a different track and to rescue this country and begin to put in place a set of strategies for recovery and growth and development and sustainability, then they've got to make an electoral choice in Trinidad and Tobago. So the fiscal measures, the $3 million bond at 125, I want to ask the minister, I mean, he knows the facts as well as I do and probably better than me. Is this a realistic resolution of the problem? Because I know he knows that this requires a resolution, and the resolution he puts forward, is it a realistic resolution? And the reason I ask is this. The amount of VAT that is owed to the private sector in this country is $6 billion, not $3 billion. Okay? So what they are doing is addressing half. So that's the first thing. The interest rate of 1.5 is not attractive to trade, and I would be surprised if the business sector as a group accept this bond. But let's see. Now, the reason why I say that is because the problem with the VAT is cash flow for the business. The same way that the minister says that he has a cash flow problem for government. So, for instance, he addresses the issue of the petroleum taxes to deal with his particular cash flow so that he can get cash. But in this instance, they will not get cash. And if they want cash, they have to go and trade it. They have to trade it at a discounted rate, Madam Speaker. And there is a law on the books in this country about VAT, which is that if the government doesn't pay VAT for 6 months, they are supposed to pay them 1% per month on the VAT that they owe the business people. So the law has been broken, and we have a situation where they are not going to get cash. And we're going to end up possibly, if they accept the bond, with not bond trading, but debt trading on the market. So, and the final question in relation to this VAT issue, if we are running deficit, as the minister admits that he is, how with deficits are you going to meet the current payments which the minister commits in the budget statement, Madam Speaker? So that is a real problem. The tax-free agriculture issue, I listened to the minister responsible for agriculture yesterday. I was not convinced that it will do anything to cause the agricultural sector to explode in production. I really do not. I have about 3,800 farmers in my constituency. And that measure, the tax-free issue, is not going to affect them in a positive way. It is better than taxation. The minister said they're hiding. But I will deal with some of the issues in agriculture in a minute. Just one or two issues because my colleague from Orapuch West dealt with it substantially in her talk. The energy fiscal measures will improve the cash flow of the government, as I mentioned, but it will have no great impact on the incentivization of the energy sector to invest, to drill. We need to think differently in the energy sector. Life insurance measure will require legislation to support tax compliance, so we have to wait on the legislation for this to take effect. And the popular, one might say populist increases. I want to deal with that because the issue there is not the measures which anybody can support, because people will get better wages, they'll get increased income, and so on. You get increased opportunity, and we are happy for the citizens of this country because they have been going through a guava season. So we are happy for that. The difficulty with this are the lack of contextual framework and the policy issues that it is going to impact on going forward. And they are going to lose control of the policy with this. So the CPEP increase, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition raised the issue of minimum wage. The member for San Fernando West as Attorney General immediately came and said, of course, we ain't gonna break the law. It'll be minimum wage plus 15 for 15%, etc. URP increase as well. The OJT increase, we're happy 8,000 people are going to be employed. The OWTU refinery, we are happy that the OWTU ownership of the refinery, we think that it is good that the refinery has remained in local hands. The challenge we have is what are the financial arrangements to address it, okay? So I want to say a few words about this. If we have an increase in wages of 15% in any sector, and this particular sector has been chosen, what do you think that will do to the industrial relations climate, Madam Speaker? If I am a union leader and I'm going to the negotiating table, where do I start? My minimum negotiating position starts at 15, and then I move from that. And I want to ask the question, what is going to be the net effect of that on the economy of Trinidad and Tobago? And even if they manage the industrial relations matters effectively, it is going to cost us in the long run. The second thing is the OJTs. The reason why I have a concern about that is this. There are about 6,000 OJTs now, graduates from the tertiary sector now who are unemployed. Some of them are unemployed for a year, 2 years, 3 years, etc., as the case might be. And this may very well be seen as a way of absorbing them. So that's why I said I'm happy for that. The problem with this is that unless you have a strategy, and I'm sure my colleague from Chaguanas East is going to speak on this. Unless you have a strategy for linking tertiary output with diversification and transformation strategy, and a manpower plan that is linked to where you are going, we are going to have a real problem. And you absorb them as OJTs, but you have not solved the sustainability issue. Just as with the CPEP and URP, you have solved the wage issue for them, and you've solved the quality of life issue and the amount of income that they have in their hand, but you've not solved the economic sustainability problem for Trinidad and Tobago. So I think the problem with this is that they are populist measures, but they are not good policy measures because they lack the other attendant measures of policy to support them, to make sense of them. Now, I noticed that subsidies and transfers remain at a high level, close to 60% almost, and that also is not sustainable. And I note the growth figures, 2019, the Minister of Finance talks about 1.7, and 2020 talks about 1.9, 2021, 4.1, 2022, 3.6. I noticed that the minister projects about the future and doesn't talk about the present. He never mentioned minus 0.2 growth for 2018, Madam Speaker. He said it was flat growth. He never mentioned the number. And therefore, what we have here really is a failing economy which has been in decline for 3 consecutive years. And what we have, that is fumes, projections about the future in a situation in which the projection for 2018, which was 1.9, turned out to be 2.1% less, minus 0.2. So the Minister of Finance says that the debt is 62.5% of GDP, and that is within reasonable limits. I wonder if that includes everything. The servicing for debt as a percentage of revenue is 17.5%, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Speaker, sorry. In addition to that, as I said, there's an overdraft of 10.6 billion if we use 2017 figures that we have. And there's an indebtedness that we need to be cognizant of, which is about $58 billion more. And we have debt that is rising, GDP has been falling. We have debt that is more than publicly declared. The ratio of 62.5 does not reflect a true picture of our debt situation. The economy is not growing, and that affects our ability to pay. And in general, if the debt is growing and the GDP is falling, the debt to GDP ratio should arithmetically be higher, Madam Speaker. So the 2018 growth is 0.2, as I said. I have problems with some of the other numbers. The 3% price assigned for natural gas, that could be a problem. But it also has implications for the revenue numbers, Madam Speaker, because if the revenue numbers are based on 3.0 and it turns out to be less, then we have a problem. The debt figure is understated, as I said. Some statements in the budget are not supported by allocation. The CPEP issue, which Dr. Bishnu Raghunath pointed out, for instance, and anyone who critically assesses the minister's output or his point of view, all of them are attacked. The minister does it all the time. Okay? The collection of $2.3 billion in taxes during the amnesty period, Madam Speaker, includes money from the oil companies, which boosted the amnesty, and they include money from local companies. And I want to say something about that. You can't come and say that the amnesty gave you $2.3 billion. You have to acknowledge that you got that money negotiated with the oil companies. But you also have to understand that the local companies that paid their money, many of them are people who are in dispute with the BIR about the amount of tax that is being assessed. And they are fighting those issues. And what they have done is, rather than face a situation where they fight with the government, don't give them the taxes, and if it goes against them, they have to pay interest on it. What they have done is paid their taxes. So if they win their cases, and I'm sure some of them will, if they win their cases, the government has to give them back. I just want to make that clear to the population. Okay? Now, this minister has also given us the wrong forecast for 2018, and I don't feel we can trust any of his predictions for 2019, for 2020, for 2021, and 2022. And the final thing I want to say on these numbers is this. We have a situation in which this report that I read from the central bank, which was published in October, but which was based on the numbers up to July of that year, that particular document had the growth rate for 2018 as 1.9, which was the promise of the minister and the CSO provisional figures. And it was published in October, just a week, I think, before the budget was actually read, Madam Speaker. The second thing is that the CSO you would read in the review of the economy is no longer going to be doing projections for this country for growth. Okay? They take that away. There's a nice rationale for it. They say there are international discussions that took place that establish best practice. And therefore, but where has it gone? It has gone to the Ministry of Finance. Okay? So the Ministry of Finance is now forecasting all this growth. They're not coming from central bank. They're not coming from the, because the central bank used to do quarterly assessments of growth. The CSO never did that. They always did annually. But so central bank is not going to do that. CSO is not going to do that. The Ministry of Finance is going to do this. So I think that we in for a lot of trouble going forward. And while they're talking about independent statistical institute on the one hand, they are organizing their business to control people's thinking about what is happening in the economy. And when you think of the narrative that has come here, in which they're basically only talking about what's going to happen and not what happened or what they're doing, then we have a problem. But there are other problems with the numbers, Madam Speaker. When you look at the draft estimates, page X10, well, that's just in Roman numeral 10, you see that the 2019 estimates for borrowing was 1.551 billion. You know what was the revised estimates under 2019? Remember I just said 1.5 billion? It is 7.845 billion. That is the revised estimate from 2018 to 2019 for borrowing in this revenue document here. And let me mention another thing, because you see this, I think all the questions in the budget are questionable. All the budget numbers are questionable. The page I'm looking here is for 5. That's to say Roman numeral 5. Look at this. Taxes on income and profits. It is down by, it was the estimates in 2019, 207,045. In 2020, 20,9,500. So the estimates for taxes on income and profit are down. So from my point of view, that is wise, prudent, and realistic. So if it goes up, you're in a better place. I have no problem with that. But the taxes on goods and services goes from 8.017 to 864. That is a $500 million increase on the taxes on goods and services, Madam Speaker. Now, how is it possible from the taxes of business to go down and the taxes from goods and services to go up by that number? I feel we have another discrepancy here. And putting the revenue numbers, I feel, it was taking the expenditure side, going to the revenue side, and then looking at how you could fill in the blanks. And then taxes on international trade. Now, this is a strange one. There is an increase of $500,000. All right? I don't know. I mean, I won't quibble with that. It's $500,000. But the point I'm making is the general point about numbers. And this general point about numbers is that we really can't believe nothing they tell us. We can't believe nothing that they say here. And we cannot believe anything that they tell us is going to happen or they're going to do. I think as a citizen of this country, I stretch my hand out to other citizens and I say, we are really, really in a whole and unholy place. Now, how many minutes do I have?
do that. You just have, well, your time is spent now. You have 10 more minutes to wrap up, yes.
Okay. Now, the incentives to the energy industry really is not going to make any difference. As I say, it will improve the cash flow, but it won't do anything else. And the only point I want to make with that, you know, we are not the energy capital of the Caribbean anymore. Ghana is. And therefore, if we want, no, I'm not glad at all. I'm very unhappy about that. But we should be doing two things. One is to make this a more attractive, competitive investment. And the second thing that we should do is to have a serious mobilization strategy at home for engagement with the energy sector in Ghana. The SPT tax credit from 20 to 25% to stimulate exploration. I think Ernst & Young said it best in their report. They said this minor change may not be viewed as sufficient. Very succinct. It's not going to make any difference, Madam Speaker. Okay, other issues in the budgets. The cement sales, the motor sales, the retail sales, which have improved from a decline position, are now only at very benign levels. And the stark truth is that the non-energy sector is weak in terms of the balance of trade, in terms of contribution to growth, and contribution to diversification, and contribution to investment, despite what the Minister of Trade said. We have in this budget one-off revenue measures that are not sustainable. We are happy for the one-off measures because things would have been worse. But it helps us with the balance sheet this time, but it does not advance sustainability. And I want to say one other thing about the budget numbers, Madam Speaker, because it's very important to the whole revenue thing. If you have a one-off intake of $5 billion and you're not going to get that again, where are you going to get the $5 billion from? Okay? There's a very important issue. And I forgot something here, which is the VAT intake, you know. They have a number for it. And when they look at the VAT income, I can't find it here, but it's in my head. I know what it is. They have a VAT income projected at $7 billion, but they commit to pay back VAT. So unless the minister tells me that's a gross figure, not a net figure, then we have another income issue involved. And as I asked the question already, if you have a deficit, how are you going to get the money to pay back the people on time? Their VAT. Now, the other thing I want to say is that is debt and servicing of debt at the level that we are talking about here, Madam Speaker, makes it very difficult to invest in any areas of growth. Okay? You see, the leader of the opposition, they may come here and they may say all kinds of things about her, but you're a very wise lady. If you notice, most of her investment measures were either public-private or private investor-led. And the reason for that is because she knows that when we go into government this time, the room space for debt and for fiscal space is almost non-existent. And they are going to have the same problem this year, and they're going to have it if God come out the thoughts of our people and they go back in, they're going to have the same problem. Whatever government goes, we're going to have the same problem. So the crisis in our country is so deep and the economic deterioration so steep that systemic cross-cutting interventions which will trigger transformation are the only things that can make a difference now. these little tinkering things, and you notice the tinkering here, light bulbs for energy, all right? CPEP thing for wages, but no policy, no macroeconomic framework, no supporting framework. That is not going to work, Madam Speaker. We are in a bad way in relation to that. It will, there are other things, you know, but I do want to say, since I just have 5 minutes, I want to say something about just one thing, and that is the issue of small businesses. I'm just looking for the numbers here, Madam Speaker, or else I could speak about it from my head, but I want to look at the numbers. There are about 26,000 businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. This is based on the CSO register. And out of that, we have about 16,000 SMEs. There was another report done in 2013, 2014, which made the figure for small businesses a lot higher. And generally, SMEs are about 75 to 80% of the businesses in this country. And if you notice, even based on what the Minister of Trade said, you would see that most of the businesses she says are investing are small and medium businesses. A lot of the manufacturers are small and medium businesses. And if you have 80% of your businesses that are small and medium, and many of them family-owned, and if you understand that family is important and you want to look after the family, make them sustainable, then family business and small and medium enterprises are very important, because the structure of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago is one in which you have the multinationals in energy, the other multinationals in non-energy, there are about 100 of them. Then you have the banking sector and the financial sector. Then you have the conglomerates, which were all family and small businesses before. They only became big over time. And therefore, if you have 80% of your productive sector in family businesses and small and medium businesses, you want a strategy that would allow them to become big and start to move from retail to export. And I want to close on that issue, Madam Speaker, because while we're dealing with, if we're dealing with diversification, if we're dealing with transformation, we must not only understand the structure of the economy, big oil, big multinationals, big conglomerates, big banks, big importers, etc., and then small and medium businesses, and we want them to grow and to export and become big too. You must understand that that is the issue of sovereignty at work here. Because, you know, they got all their things, they went to the OWTU because they know we were talking about employee share ownership plans. They expanded their housing program because we said that unless you had stability in housing for the working class to grow the middle class, then you could not have your people developing with equity as you grow in the society. All of those things are influenced by that. They are not influencing us, we are influencing them. But I want to say the small business, the medium enterprise strategy is critical for Trinidad and Tobago. How much you have? Okay. And this to me is very vital, because that is where you create the jobs. They create the most jobs. In every society, especially in the European Union, in the Nordic countries, in many of the countries around us now, like Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, etc., the whole focus is on small and medium enterprises. So you could create more jobs, you can have more local ownership. That is the issue of sovereignty. Because if the Chinese or the Americans or the companies from those countries own your country, that is a different thing from if your local people own your country. So it's not only about jobs and job creation, it's also about business creation. And this budget is very weak on all the things that have to do with recovery, growth, development, and job creation, and very, very, very misguided on the issue of taxation and on the issue of revenue and on the issue of debt and debt servicing. Thank you very much.
Members, I believe it's agreed that we take the suspension now. We'll be back at 2:35.